The business world is littered with the wreckage of mergers and acquisitions gone wrong. AOL Time Warner, GE Honeywell. Why do corporate executives take this tough path when there are other less costly and less complicated ways of achieving corporate goals? Well, INSEAD Strategy Professor Laurence Capron and a colleague from Duke University have authored a paper on this for the Harvard Business Review, and Laurence joins me now. Welcome to INSEAD Knowledge.
Thank you.
Why do business people seem to jump at the chance to do M&As? What is so appealing? Do they get seduced by their financial advisors? Is it an ego trip?
Part of the reality is ego trip and power building type of reason. This is definitely true. At the same time, acquisition remains a very powerful tool to transform your organization to get capability very quickly. And it's easy to fall in several traps. And I will give you just two types of traps. First, executive CEO are incentivized to grow their company very quickly. So for example, an executive typically will be told to grow its company by 20% per year, and obviously the most rapid way to do it is to do an acquisition.
Buy something rather than do it organically.
Exactly, and of course you can grow, but it can be value-destroying growth. And the second type of trap is that you are in an industry, you see all your competitors making acquisition, and it's very easy to jump on the wave because you're afraid of being left out of that wave.
It's kind of benchmarking, and if he's doing it, I have to do it, and it's a different kind of competition.
Exactly, and by doing so, you forget to follow a very disciplined process.
You forget the business sometimes.
Exactly.
All right, okay, so why should a company consider doing a merger and acquisition?
What we found in our study that you still have a predominant proportion of companies today who just rely on their internal development effort. And what we found is that companies which are capable of using the full range of corporate development tools, including acquisition, including alliance contract, to supplement their internal growth efforts, are more likely to outperform the company which just stick with one key approach, particularly internal development. So M&A is very important today.
But there are other ways of acquiring skills. If you just want one part of a company's business, you don't have to buy the whole company and then sell everything other than what you want. You can, what are your options just to get that one piece of business or that one set of schools?
Exactly. I mean, the trap, of course, is to jump to an acquisition deal instead of considering the full range of potential corporate development tools. So typically, when you need a specific capability, you need a technology, you need specific human skills, for example, you may first consider to go for a contract. You could also consider to make an alliance when contract, for example, is not sufficient enough. So you may decide to go for an alliance. And at last resort, you should consider an acquisition when you cannot obtain a capability through less integrative way. And why do I say at last resort? Because we know that acquisitions are very expensive, they are very complex and very disruptive for the organization.
It's easy to sign the deal, and there's a lot of flashbulbs going off and all that, but it's the integration that sometimes takes you away from your own business.
The deal part is a fun part. You have CEO getting excited with investment banker about making an acquisition, they leave their mark. So it's a fun part. We all know that, of course, the difficult job is post-merger integration. When you buy a firm, typically to get its capability, it's going to be very hard to be able to extract the value out of the target. You disrupt most of the time the target. You also disrupt your organization because most of the time to make it work, you will have to dedicate your own resources, your own staff to the target. And so you are going to distract your own people from your core businesses. And also most of the time, particularly when you make big acquisition and you take a lot of debt, I mean, you are going to put your company under higher risk of financial distress.
Now, having said all that, those are true for successful acquisitions as well. I mean, even something that had sound business sense behind it. So having said all that, and we don't know what goes on behind the closed doors in a company, are there any company M&As you can think of that maybe look good to you, that seem to make good business sense?
If you look at a firm like Cisco or Johnson & Johnson, for example, so they tend to be very good at, for example, picking up early winners and then ramp up their sales very quickly. Of course, once in a while, they make mistake and they fail on some acquisition, but instead of failing 70% of the case, which is the average rate failure of acquisition, they might fail between 20 and 30%. So they have developed some capability within the firm. They have developed some disciplined process to go about acquisition.
Today, I'm sure a lot of people, a lot of CEOs may be looking at other businesses and, gee, we should buy that because it's so cheap and we've been thinking about getting into that business. What do you say to people? What's your checklist of things to consider before you jump at that bargain price?
Again, if you buy a cheap target and you want to take advantage of an arbitrage opportunity, you kind of buy low, you sell high. It's a value capture game. But if you buy it to put it in your portfolio, then you are going to encounter the same type of issue than when you make an acquisition, that at the end of the day is going to be very costly for you, for your organization, to integrate it. You will still have to put a lot of your resources. And if in the first place it didn't fit your portfolio, it's going to create a stretch for your organization. You're going to increase the complexity of your organization, and over time you may, in any case, lose out of that game.
So you can't get seduced by the low price. You still have to be disciplined about what you're buying. So you're going to be teaching an executive education course here at INSEAD on mergers and acquisitions. Are these the sorts of things, these sorts of issues you're going to be covering, or what's your outline for the course?
The main objective first is to step back and say, why does the company in the first place want to grow? Does it need to grow? I mean, there's definitely pressure to grow, but why do we grow? And then once company has decided to grow, is again to try to clarify the strategic roadmap.
Now, what about the psychology involved here? Because we spoke earlier about there's an ego trip, and people do have egos. They want to perform well, but
typically you have CEO who announce a deal. The market react very negatively. So, for example, overnight they can destroy 20% of the market cap of their company, and then the next week you are going to see a competitor announcing the same type of deal at the same type of price, and again destroying value. So we try to understand what is the psychology behind that deal. Of course, you have ego and kind of irrational reason. But I think more importantly, when you have a high level of uncertainty, you see industry changing rapidly, you don't know what to do. And to some extent, the social proof argument here is very important. So to look at what your peers, particularly when they are leading firms in the industry, are currently doing, you will use that information as an input in your own decision-making process. So instead of, to some extent, processing your own information on specific deal, you will just kind of follow what others are doing. And I think this is a very powerful dynamic here. And so we try to make executive and CEO aware of this kind of psychological trap. The key message is really that acquisition is just a tool. It is not a substitute for your strategy. It's a tool by which you are going to achieve your strategic objective. So you first need to be very clear about your strategic roadmap, and then to think about the tools which are going to help you execute your strategy.
Thank you very much, Laurence Capron, for being with us on INSEAD Knowledge.
Thank you.